Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Doug, welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 Sports video. And today, as I rock the Patriot Pat without a cat, we're going to talk about the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. Quarterback is my favorite position because he's the signal caller, the general, the man that catches the ball and all that. By the way, only one of these 10 have played for the New England Patriots in lifetime. Obviously, you'll probably know who that is. But anyway, here we go. Top 10 quarterbacks of all time. And number 10 is A-Rod, a.k.a. Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was a pretty good guy. He came from the University of Cal. He kept dropping. A lot of people said San Francisco should have had him in the 2005 draft because he was a Cal product and all that. And then all of a sudden, he over into Green Bay's lap. The Green Bay needed a heir apparent to Brett Favre, so they took Rodgers. And a few years later, he finally got himself to the pinnacle of Green Bay, being the number one when Brett Favre decided to retire and then unretire to join the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, it was his team to lose and all that. 2011, he led the Packers to the Super Bowl against the Steelers, and he had himself a bright future ahead of him where Favre basically fell flat. Aaron Rodgers would be soon chased out of Green Bay because of his problems. He went to the Jets, kind of like Brett Favre did. And everyone thought that he would go to Minnesota next because obviously Green Bay, Jets, Minnesota, like Brett Favre. But nope. Aaron Rodgers, well, he had that ACL tear first play of the 2024 season, which was shocking. He decided to join the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he is going to retire as a Pittsburgh Steeler in 2026. I know one massive honorable mention is Terry Bradshaw because the whole thing with Pittsburgh and all that. But yeah, he didn't make the cut. Number 9 is Steve Young. Steve Young was a pretty good quarterback himself with San Francisco. But before that, he actually was a good quarterback for Brigham Young University. Then went to the USFL, that spring league that was trying to compete with the NFL. He played for Los Angeles. He signed a 40-year contract, 40, back when the USFL thought they were going to be kings of spring football, which they weren't. Steve Young played for the USFL, then they folded, then he went to Tampa Bay, and unfortunately Hugh Culverhouse in his penny pitching ways, which screwed over Doug Williams, which screwed over Steve Young, and Tampa decided to trade Steve Young to San Francisco for a few picks. Of course, San Francisco still has Joe Montana. Steve Young played a few games. He actually had a crazy 40-yard touchdown run when he just stumbled past Joey Browner and Jesse Solomon. Yeah, Steve Young was good, and then he was the main quarterback for the Niners once Joe Montana went down with that injury in the 1991 NFC title game. They decided to keep the younger Steve Young, the younger guy, pun intended, and trade Montana to Kansas City. Steve Young would win the championship and get the monkey off his back in 1995, but injuries and concussions would just ruin him. Number 8 is Drew Brees. Yes, I know he's got all those passing marks and all that, but he's got one Super Bowl ring to show for it. But what else does he have? Drew Brees actually was not always a New Orleans legend. He was a San Diego decent quarterback out of Purdue in the third round in 2001. The Chargers drafted him, and Drew Brees was good. And then all along came 2004 controversy with Eli Manning being booted. Didn't want to play for San Diego, even though the Chargers were going to draft him. They decided Eli wanted to move elsewhere. So the Chargers traded with the New York Giants for their quarterback pick, which was one, Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers played through the hearts of San Diego quite well. Drew Brees was injury prone. He almost went to Miami, but Miami were not happy with his injuries and all that and took Dante Culpepper. Big mistake. New Orleans, basically with nothing to lose because, Hurricane Katrina and almost losing the team to San Antonio, took Drew Brees in free agency, paired him up with Reggie Bush, paired him up with some other guys, and the Saints crushed everyone and shockingly won the 2 seed in the NFC that year, the year after Katrina. Their home sweet dome. Brees would be a New Orleans legend for life, giving the Saints the Super Bowl in 2010 over the Colts. And he was always a great quarterback and all that, and ended his career as a. Wait, wasn't he in Indianapolis Colts or something? Yeah, hang on 1 second. Yeah. I have a feeling Drew Brees was a um Indianapolis Colt, wasn't he? Or yeah, I feel like he was. So anyway, yeah, when I do my research and all that. Yeah, no, sorry. He played for San Diego and New Orleans. He almost went to Indianapolis, but he chose not to. So yeah, he was just a two-team player and all that, and retired with the Saints, which was amazing. Number 7 is Dan Marino from Miami. Dan Marino is the first quarterback on this list to actually be a one-team player and all that. Of the other ones, there are only one other guy. Yeah, he's the him and number 6 in this list are the only two that have played for one team, on one team only. So Dan Marino is this great quarterback from the University of Pitt with the Pitt Panthers, shocking Georgia in the Sugar Bowl that 1 year with that comeback with 13 seconds left. Dan Marino was expected to do well in the draft. 83 had the draft of 6 quarterbacks that had highs, lows, and mid in betweens. Unfortunately for Dan Marino, he slid down so much so that the Pittsburgh Steelers took senior smoke at defensive tackle by the name of Gabriel Rivera instead of Dan Marino because Marino played for the University of Pitt in the Steelers' backyard, which was pathetic that Pittsburgh gambled on this Gabriel Rivera guy, especially after he had that car crash that's nearly severed his spine and all that. But yeah, Dan Marino slid down to Miami. Don Shula took one look at him and said maybe it will work. Getting rid of that whole duel of Woodley and Strock in the meantime. So Marino would do well. His second full season in 1984, he rewrote the record books with over 5,000 passing yards and 48 touchdowns. It was like, what the heck happened? And Marino led the Dolphins to the 1985 Super Bowl, losing to Joe Montana and the Niners. Unfortunately, Marino, this would be the only time he got to the Super Bowl. Miami had some good teams, but they had rotten luck. They fell in the AFC title game on home turf in 1993 to the Buffalo Bills. I believe that was the only time the Buffalo Bills played in the AFC title game away from um, Highmark. I know that. Or what? No, not Highmark. Whatever it's called. Whatever, the old Ralph Wilson. Well, new era. Anyway, and then came the 93 season. Marino was injured. Scott Mitchell played his way to everyone's hearts and got the Dolphins to a 9-2 start, and then they blew up, losing the last 5 games, missing the playoffs. But yeah, Dan Marino came back in 94. He was good. He had the clock play, he faked the Jets out with the fake spike. And, he was good for Miami, but they just couldn't produce in the playoffs when they needed to. And poor Dan Marino, he had to retire in 1989 with nothing to show for it. Speaking of 83, that's the other quarterback. Number 6 is John Elway, the other quarterback in the 83 Cubs. Although Jim Kelly could also have been in the top 10 too, for Buffalo winning 4 Super Bowl berths but not winning any titles. I mean, you also had Todd Blackledge, Tony Eason, and who is that 6th guy? I can't remember. Pagel? No. Well, regardless of that, John Elway will always be a good quarterback. Baltimore drafted him. The Baltimore Colts drafted him, but he refused to play for Baltimore. In the last video, I talked about John Elway, that trade with the Colts and the Broncos, and how he didn't like Baltimore's system. He found being a outfielder for the Yankees farm system was better off. And one big reason why he didn't want to go to Baltimore, and people forget about it, was that Frank Kush was the head coach, and Kush coached Arizona State for many years, got booted because of his illegal practices, if you will, the bull ring. And Elway knew Kush well because Elway played for Stanford and Kush was ASU, part of the Pac-10. So Elway didn't want to play for Kush. So Elway got a trade to Denver, and the rest was history. Denver looked good. He got Denver to 4 Super Bowls in the 1980s. Well, 89-90 counts as well. and couldn't produce and all that. But at least he got to the Super Bowls. The drive, the fumble, the the way we were. I don't know. Just kidding. But anyway, yeah, John Elway was always there. But he did win back-to-back rings in 98 and 99 to solidify his legendary status and to win the title. Number 5 is Brett Favre or Favre. Yeah, I know. I was just joking. But yeah, Brett Favre was a great quarterback from the University of Southern Miss. He had that famous Hail Mary against Louisville in Louisville, and then Atlanta took him in the second round, mispronounced his name like I did. And then Jerry Glanville didn't find favor in him. He liked Chris Miller. Brett Favre had some off-field problems and all that. But then the Packers decided to trade for Favre and gave a first rounder to Atlanta. Atlanta felt like, oh my God, we just fleeced the Green Bay Packers. One problem though, that it bit them in the ass. Favre came in for Don Majkowski one game against the Bengals, led them to a title win, and then they faced the Steelers. Favre was off and running, and the Packers, 3 NFL MVPs, so Super Bowl in 1997. Coming back from a Vicodin addiction before the 1996 season, which was amazing. And then in 2003, having that magical first half against the Oakland Raiders on Monday Night Football in Oakland when he threw for 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards because of his father's death and all that. And even the Raider fans were cheering for him. Favre was pretty good, but he was brash and threw postseason interceptions like candy, especially the terrible interception that cost the Packers the 2007-08 NFC title game against the Giants. And of course, the Giants beat the Patriots. Fuck you, Eli Manning. But the fact of the matter is that Brett Favre was good. And then he decided to retire, which was great. But then he unretired to sign with the Jets. He did well with the Jets, but then he played through an injury, which he should never have done. And it cost the Jets the AFC East and actually cost the Patriots a playoff berth, actually, too. Fuck you, Brett Favre. And then Favre went to the hated rivals, Minnesota Vikings. That's something you don't do if you're a Packer fan. You're a Packer, go to the Vikings. And he would throw, in his first season, he would throw a terrible playoff interception in New Orleans. And Paul Allen, the Vikings radio guy, went bonkers saying that Favre could have easily ran for 10 yards. He kicked the field goal. They miss. We go to overtime. No big deal. But Favre's gunsling ways cost him dearly near the end. Number 4, Johnny Unitas. People forget about how good Johnny Unitas was way back in the day. In 1956, Pittsburgh had him, and then they decided to dump him off. And then he had a 50-cent phone call and got in touch with the Baltimore Colts, and he somehow helped the Baltimore Colts do well. And they were good teams in the NFL in the late 50s, early 60s, winning NFL titles before the Super Bowl era. Johnny Unitas was pretty good and all that, the flat top and all that. Unfortunately, he would get hurt in 1968, and Earl Morrall would actually pick up the pieces and win NFL MVP and help the Colts go 13-1, which was ironic because Earl Morrall in 1972 would do the same thing after Bob Griese went down with an injury. He would actually win all his games and help the Miami Dolphins win the championship. Nevertheless, Johnny Unitas was pretty good. He once had 47 straight games with a touchdown pass. In these days, it would be 3 straight years throwing a touchdown in every single freaking game. But yeah, Johnny Unitas was amazing. He was the man in the 70s and all that. Won a ring in Super Bowl V, which was great. And then he went to the San Diego Chargers, which should never have happened. Number 3 is another great Colt quarterback by the name of Peyton Manning. I know Peyton Manning played for the Broncos, but I say he's a better Colt than a Bronco. Peyton Manning was great. He came from the University of Tennessee. He had good quarterback space. He had a quarterback pedigree because his father Archie was a starter with Ole Miss, and Peyton decided to go to Tennessee to try to do his own legacy. Eli went to Ole Miss. No, that he is a 2-time Super Bowl winner, but his numbers are not really that great. Nevertheless, Peyton was good. The Colts picked him up first overall in 1998. He rewarded them. Although the Colts kind of did suck, he was still there for the long run, and the Colts felt good about him. The only problem with Peyton is that he didn't win too many titles because of one Tom frickin' Brady. But anyway, Peyton Manning was a great quarterback and all that. If he played in the NFC, he probably would have been a fearful quarterback. He ended up having a neck problem in 2011, lost the season, and the Colts decided to get Andrew Luck in the draft, and basically they made it known they wanted to move on from Peyton. So Peyton moved on to the Denver Broncos, who didn't have a quarterback legacy after John Elway passed the baton on to people like Brian Greasy and Kyle Orton and Jack Cutler, for that matter. But yeah, Peyton went to Denver. He transformed Denver quite well, winning a few trips to the Super Bowl, badly being defeated in 2014 by the Legion of Boom defense of the Seahawks. But then 2 years later, the Broncos crushed the Panthers in their 15-1 quarterback Cam Newton. Peyton would retire on top, which was good. Number 2 is Joe Cool, Joe Montana. Joe Montana, great quarterback from the University of Notre Dame, played in the famous chicken soup game in the 1979 Cotton Bowl when Notre Dame played Houston in one of the coldest days in Dallas history. And yes, Dallas can get ice storms. So anyway, yeah, that happened. He missed many parts of the game, and Houston was up 34-12. However, he came back and won the game 35-34. The Niners used a third-round pick on him, and he actually had a massive comeback against the New Orleans Saints in 1980 that brought him to the lexicon. He would throw the famous pass known as the catch to Dwight Clark and beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, thanks to Dan Buns as well. But anyway, Joe Montana did his job. He was Joe Cool with those Pepsi commercials. And yeah, 1985 title, 1989 title, 1990 title. He was pretty good. He was the quintessential 80s quarterback. Unfortunately, though, Montana would injure himself in the 91 NFC title game. I kind of alluded to when I talked about Steve Young. Montana was hit from behind by Leonard Marshall, and that kind of ruined him for almost a full season. He did play the final game in 1991, 92 against the Lions on Monday Night Football, but other than that, he was done for. People were upset that Montana had to leave. Well, they decided to get rid of Montana to Kansas City for some picks. I think Steve Bono went to the Niners, right? Oh, no, sorry. Bono went from San Fran to Kansas City, but as well. But yeah, Joe Montana looked good. Joe Cool, he led the Chiefs to the 1994 AFC title game against the Bills. He got busted on that. And then, of course, shocking Houston, and then with Keith Cash throwing that ball into Buddy Ryan's snot on a poster. But yeah, Joe Montana ended his career at Kansas City. He had that duel with Elway in Denver against Denver, so Joe Montana was still good. And number 1, of course, it's Tom Brady. Everyone fucking knows it's Tom Brady. Tom Terrific. He's my boy. Well, anyway, Tom Terrific, his career actually ended up not starting the greatest. He was basically a backup from Michigan for a while, and then he picked up speed with Michigan and led them to the Orange Bowl in his senior year, which they beat Bama because Bama missed an extra point in overtime. He would be the 6th quarterback picked in that 2000 draft, even worse than T. Martin, Chris Redman, and Giovanni Carmazzi, among others. But nevertheless, and Spurgeon win. But yeah, Brady outperformed them all. And, he went up to be the backup for the 2001 Patriots. And then when Bledsoe got injured by Mo Lewis's hit out of bounds, Brady had to come in. And somehow he shockingly got the Patriots to 11 wins and the AFC East crown. And that divisional round game against the Raiders, the Tuck Rule game, and all that I thought the Raiders were going to win. Mind you, I was not a Patriots fan at the time. But yeah, Brady was there. Brady actually got hurt during the AFC title game in Pittsburgh. Bledsoe had to come in and help the Patriots out. Brady would be the starter in the Super Bowl, would have that great drive that saw Adam Vinatieri kick the winning field goal in with like 2 seconds left, and it was over. And everyone was happy. Oh, yes, they were. So yeah, everyone was happy. And then, of course, Brady would continue performing 2004 Super Bowl, 2005 Super Bowl. He was good. And then the Patriots got themselves into deep trouble with a couple times with Deflategate and Spygate and all that shit. Brady actually led the Patriots to a perfect regular season in 2007, which was great with Randy Moss and all that, Wes Welker. But yeah, the Patriots looked pretty good, but then lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl because the Giants just had a good defensive mind. And then Brady injured himself in the first game of the 2008 season against the Chiefs when he was barreled over and hurt his knee. Patriots missed the playoffs by 1 game, which sucked. But Tom Brady came back, and then, he was good, and then got the Patriots back to the mountaintop in 2015. And then 2017, Goodell basically gave him a 4-game suspension because of Deflategate. I think the other owners were basically forcing Goodell to do something, or else they were going to rebel against Roger. Patriots went 3-1 in those 4 games, like I predicted. And lo and behold, the Patriots beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady gets revenge. I just wish someone had shoved Roger Goodell off that podium. Telling you, we don't want this cocksucker anywhere near our thing. Anyway, Brady would still perform well, giving the Patriots Super Bowls in the mid 2010s and then 2019 against the Rams. And then he decided to leave for Tampa, which shocked a lot of people because everyone thought that Tom Brady was going to retire a New England Patriot. But he spent a few years with the Bucks. He did win the Super Bowl with the Bucks, but still, I mean, him on another team, it just gives you the freaking icks. It does, it does. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.